Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Anderson, and I'm the Associate Director of Podcast Sales Marketing here at SiriusXM Media. And today I am joined by Mike Davis from Dirty Mo Media, one of our most favorite partners. And we're going to talk a little bit about one of the key trends that we identified in our recent podcast trends report for 2024 entitled Creators at the Core, which we like to call the main hustle. And with this trend, what we really are hoping to showcase is just the way that podcasts have elevated into a main entertainment source for listeners, a main source of income for creators, and a media plan mainstay for so many brands. So with that, Mike, would you mind going ahead and just introducing yourself and talking a little bit about what Dirty Mo is and how you think it fits into this trend of the main hustle?
Well, first of all, Sophie, thank you for this opportunity. I am a content podcast geek, and if you get me on this topic, I might not stop. So you've been warned. You keep me on track here. But first of all, thank you for that. Dirty Mo Media, we are an entertainment company and a branded content studio. Okay, that's what we. That's our core competency is the podcast, but we also get a lot of extensions out of that. It's so interesting that this is the topic that we're going to discuss today because I got a lot to say about it, frankly. It has emerged for our company as so much more than what we would have even thought when we started it, right? When we started it, it was just a way for Dale Earnhardt Jr., who co-founded the company with me in 2013. He was a very popular race car driver. He was still in the thick of his career and very influential. And we were just like, this is a mechanism in which Dale can connect with his fan base because that's what our job was, to always be connecting with his fans. Accessibility, a transparency that, that you otherwise don't get. What it has become is way more than that. Way more than that. And so Dale Jr. has really found his voice in terms of being a host of his own. It also kind of gave him repetitions that emerged to him becoming a NASCAR broadcaster in his life after racing, right? He didn't get that seat time until we were doing the podcast. So it really kind of helped him springboard into that career. It also has really emerged as the ultimate storytelling, component that I think we're good at. We can get better, of course, but like for people to be able to have the ability to tell their story, long form, short form, really, it's an open canvas, right? It's emerged into such a big mechanism in which we use to do that. The other thing I will tell you is from a business standpoint, didn't see this coming. We again, I gave you the reasons why we started it, but it has absolutely become a new component of revenue and business opportunity. We started with one employee. We now have, 15 employees, and we're growing all the time. We're tearing down walls. We're interesting, Sophie, because we are a media company inside of a racing shop. All right. Yeah. So imagine that. Like, I don't think there's many of us out there. So, we look at what makes us different and unique, and we really try to capitalize on that.
Yeah. And I think that that point, that you made about how truly kind of niche your company is, yet you've been able to scale and grow and find so much opportunity in this medium is such a great case study of how much opportunity podcasting has presented for brands, for creators, that I don't think a lot of people anticipated as recently as a few years ago. And we've just, on the listener end too, we've seen so much growth, and the rates have really been exceeding all expectations and far outpacing other media formats. Listeners are just like hungry for new content. They're devoting more and more time to listening than ever before. And I think that it's high time we kind of give podcasting its flowers for this like really rapid expansion that we've seen.
Listen, I have a theory. The theory is as long as people have ears, there's going to be a need for the audio medium, right? And you can expand into video and you can expand in all these different things. Of course, I mean, you should, but there is a powerful tool in the audio medium, right? And I'm not ever going to lose that because the fact is that there's strengths in the power of audio. There is the way sound connects to your brain. And if you do it right and you create some things, it can be such a way, an outlet for people to create. I look at it as an art, and I think content creators in the podcasting world are going to emerge as our big media influencers today. The way we kind of looked at, Walter Cronkite, a generation ago or something like that. Like, I think the podcasters will be the next big media influencers. And I think you're already seeing it, right? I mean, it's starting to happen.
I agree. I just think that the format creates this like level of intimacy and connection between the hosts and the listeners that you can't really find anywhere else. And even though I think a lot of brands might not think about podcasters as influencers right off the bat, they might be more inclined to, go to social media or, digital content creators. Not giving podcasts sort of the credit for the influence that they hold is a miss, I think, because it's such a powerful medium and these voices hold so much weight for the listeners that tune into them regularly.
I'll even go a step further and tell you that. So a little bit about Dale. He was kind of an introvert, and I shouldn't even say kind of. He was an introvert, right? For somebody that's as popular as he was as an athlete, he was never comfortable in the big settings, and he's not that social butterfly that a lot of people are. Well, the fact is, though, is that podcasting put him in a comfort zone to where he's able to have conversations that he otherwise never would do, long form conversations. And so what we built, our whole network was built off of a show called the Dale Jr. Download. And the Dale Jr. Download is obviously hosted by Dale, and it's a long form interview series. And what I realized happened, again, would not have predicted this, but there's conversations that people are having with Dale and vice versa. Dale's having with them that you would have thought they would have had a long time ago. But they didn't, people that were, that were really good friends with his father. And his dad, obviously, is like the greatest NASCAR driver of all time. So it's, there's just a lot of things that happen in this forum and in this medium and it serves both the listener, the host, the guests, and everybody in between, right? Because it just opens up things for even the introverts, even the shy people. For some reason, like Dale's found his comfort zone in that studio and in that headset.
Yeah, I love to hear that. We hear it from so many of our other podcast partners too. We work with Conan O'Brien, and he said despite hosting a late night TV show for decades, his favorite conversations are the one he's had on the podcast. And so I think it really speaks to like the power of the format to give these incredible personalities like Dale, like Conan, the chance to really just lean in and have those unfiltered conversations that aren't possible anywhere else.
It's because there are fewer parameters, I believe. I mean, there's just, it feels like they can be themselves more. I hope we don't ever lose that, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Because the more popular things become, the more you sort of start diluting it but I hope podcasts never lose that freedom, that independence to really kind of let loose, especially like the Conan, which I listen to that, right? It's a fascinating podcast. It's not the same experience as when you're watching Conan in his late night show. It's completely different, right?
Yeah.
And that's what podcasts should be. It should be that intimate level to really get you think you know about these folks, you don't know them because the things that you see through TV or in his case, late night talk show, or in Dale's case, in racing, those are snippets, and you don't get intimate with snippets. You really get to know a person in that full, vulnerable transparency that I think podcasts really provide.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to rewind a little bit to something you said about expanding into video. I know that, many of the shows on your network are now taking a multi-channel approach and finding new ways to reach listeners. What do you think is the opportunity there for creators to test in new formats and, really like expand the story?
Listen, I'm no expert in this. I just try to take a commonsensical approach to it. And it's try to feed the audience as many different ways as you can. Make it as available as you can. So that's simple. I'm not saying that it works better. I think sometimes it's a different audience, right? So like if you plan to grow or if you plan to try to get your product out to more people, then the many ways you can do it, the better, right? So we've had television licenses. I learned that audience is completely different than the podcast audience. I've learned that the YouTube audience is completely different than the audio, the podcast. So I don't see that as a bad thing. I also don't think that it's like if anybody's saying that, oh, well, the future of podcasting is in video, I don't agree with that. I just think it's a great extension to the product that you're putting out. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I fully agree. It seems complementary and not like a replacement. Because to your point, audio is the space that's kind of given everyone that sense of comfort and intimacy to open up and to build those strong bonds with listeners. So that has to stay sort of our North Star, I think.
I was at a seminar earlier this morning, a keynote a speech, and the speaker said something very interesting. I think I agree with it. It's like, go do the video, do the YouTube if you can, but don't do it unless your product is as good as the audio. Like like you could go expose yourself. It's like you don't want to go do it just because people tell you to do it. Do it if it expands the product and also the quality doesn't drop off. And so I agree with that as well. Like I think it's an extension of your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, especially as so many advertisers see the growth of podcasting expand into new areas and new formats, there's a lot of opportunity to get more creative in the ways that we partner with them and get more creative in how they can really integrate into the content and complement the storytelling. So that is an advantage that I see as well. But to your point, it can't come at the expense of the storytelling, the conversations, because without that, then, we have to serve the listeners first.
Right. It's funny. So my parents, they still don't know that what Dirty Mo Media does is a podcast, because they don't, even though it's on their phone, I'd say, Dad, look, see that app right there? It just delivers it right to you. Yeah. But he knows it as a television show. And that's fine. Mm-hmm. There's an audience for that, right? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how often I tell him, it's a podcast. You can listen to the full thing. That's an edited version. You don't want the edited. You want the full conversation. Yeah, it just isn't working. So that's when I go, okay, you know what? Let the TV part serve the TV people. Let the podcast part serve the podcast folks. And nothing for us performs better than the podcast. Mm-hmm. Not the television, not the videos. Our podcasts are still way more performing than anything else we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that makes sense, given that's really where the audience discovered the content, and given the fact that it allows them to really take those conversations and stories with them as they move through their life and, tackle different priorities and, serve as a companion with them throughout their routines. We have so many listeners that say, the podcasts they listen to are an essential part of their routine. They never skip an episode. They listen to the same shows at the same time, and it helps to really get them through the sort of dredge,
Yeah. In terms of how we grow, when we'll start a new show, I'll get the question every single time, aren't you concerned that, your new show with this new race car driver or this new influencer is going to sort of cannibalize what you have on these other shows? And my answer to that is I want there to be a show for everyone, right? That's my goal. Create something for everyone. I don't create these things so that they all go listen to all of our shows. If I can get one person to work into their muscle memory or their podcast group, because everybody's got their own, their core podcast that they go to, right? And that they have and that they subscribe and follow to. If I can have one of those from the Dirty Mo platform in their lives, then that's my win, right?
Yeah.
So, but listen, consumption habits, boy, you could do a whole show just on that, right?
Yeah.
Consumption habits alone are always changing.
Yeah, and always fascinating and exciting to unpack. I want to talk a little bit more about the Dirty Mo Network and the shows that you all have developed and welcomed onto the slate. How do you go about identifying talent and storytellers that you think will complement the overall brand and that you think will appeal to your broader audience?
that's a great question, and I'll start by saying knowing who my audience is. So I think our audience specifically is that blue collar, working class American, right? It's very similar to the NASCAR audience, the NASCAR audience. So being that is our thing that we anchor to. Like, I go look for ideas and I look for content creators that relate to that. That's a good place to start, isn't it? As long as an Earnhardt is part of Dirty Mo Media, which means forever, then racing is always going to be our core competency, right? Or motorsports and that kind of stuff. Because what's an Earnhardt, right? Without the steering wheel and without that stuff. So we really do look at other influencers that can fit into our world, right? And can really serve our audience. That being said, our ideas are all over the place, right? Like, we can come up with some crazy ideas. I love the ideating part of this. How many of our ideas actually make it into a show or come into a show? Like, probably 1%, right? But I like to think Dirty Mo Media is an idea company, and we just throw ideas, and we're not afraid of bad ideas. We don't think there's our bad ideas. There's just ideas that we couldn't go implement. So I go look at people that if we got an idea that really serves our audience, we feel like there's a place in our network for it. I look at people that can serve that. I don't believe in just this land grab of quantity and just doing all these shows. We're very specific. And we won't start a show if it doesn't serve a specific purpose. And there's shows that I know that we've started that were never, they were so niche that we're not going to have huge audience numbers. But they had a different purpose. They're not supposed to. They may be bridging us into where we're going next. They may be, we have an IndyCar podcast. IndyCar for the NASCAR audience, it's motorsports for sure, but the guy that we have that hosts our IndyCar podcast, his name's Connor Daly. He's just a grinder, right? Mm-hmm. He's not one of those racers that is retiring on his yacht and going around the country in these multi-million-dollar buses. He's a grinder. He's working class. He talks like us, mm-hmm. and I love that about him. And that podcast can do whatever it wants to do as long as I have the right person on it, right? And that's what I look for. Did that even come close to answering your question?
Yeah, no, that was really enlightening, honestly, because I think I spend so much time looking at data and, metrics based on surveys that we run with our audience. And what it really comes down to for so many listeners is that the host feels like a peer and feels like a friend to them, and is someone that they look to for advice, for friendship, for joy. And I think you're right. It's like the content doesn't really even matter if the host is someone that really resonates with people and can deliver the conversation in a way that that has impact, And I think that when brands support those types of shows, what they're really sponsoring and what they're really capitalizing upon is that relationship, because there's so many listeners who they want to go out of their way to support brands that support their favorite shows because they know that they're making that relationship possible to a certain extent.
There is the other answer to your question, and that is, if it entertains us, then we're more likely to go do a show. If I find something interesting, I will go up and down the roster of current NASCAR Cup Series drivers, and I ask the question, well, who of them interests me? Mm-hmm. And Dale will do the same thing, and then Dale and I will compare notes, and we're like, who out there is interesting to us? And we have a show called Actions Detrimental with Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin's a race car driver, does not drive for Dale, has nothing to do in terms of the Earnhardt ecosystem that we have around us, but he's just fascinating. He owns a race team, and his business partner is Michael Jordan.
Wow.
Okay, so yeah, you've got my interest already. And oh, by the way, he's sort of the last of the old guard of opinion givers, right? Like these days, a lot of these new guys, they just, they're trying to, they've been kind of corporified, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're just going to stay, they just want to not cause a ruckus. They just want to just stay focused, please their sponsors, race the car, give as little of it, any type of transparency as possible. Denny is the last of the old guard where it's like he will let it fly. And so we were just like, man, Denny really interests us because he can't not share what his thoughts are. He wears his emotions on his sleeves. He says everything that's on his mind. And so we went to Denny and just said, this needs to be a podcast, man. Quit giving all this to Twitter.
For free.
Right. Twitter's not going to pay you.
Yeah.
So let's channel all of these wonderful opinions, most of which we don't even agree with, but let's channel them into a podcast. And so we created a podcast for our second year of it. It's doing really well.
That's awesome. Yeah. I feel like whenever, an athlete can really build a point of view, fans resonate with that because they're excited to get to know their favorite athletes on a more personal level. They're excited to have, context as to how they, achieve such incredible things. I think we're all kind of in awe of people who can compete on a stage of that caliber.
You said something earlier, and I think it's so true. Relatability is everything, right? And we aspire as a platform, as a network, and a company to be relatable with our audience, to know them. And I know that sounds very cliche. It does. But we really do try to make attempts to have that relationship with them. We do, extensions like events, fan engagement events and things like that to know them by name. And I don't know. Maybe that's a wild dream right there, just to try to grow an audience and also know them. But at the same time, if you can achieve it, imagine what special thing you have there with that relationship with your listener, that sense of community with your listener, which, by the way, I will also say podcasts really do a nice job with that, right? It really helps kind of feel like a community of listeners. If you are one of the people that listens to a certain podcast, religiously, you do feel a part of that. And so that's another thing. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. I wanted to also bring it up. I think that's a key point in podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in addition to the host and listener relationship, there is that sense of relating to people who enjoy the same content as you and who are tuning in as well. And people find so much camaraderie in that. And I think people, that's why we're seeing people get so excited about things like live event opportunities and, opportunities to meet their favorite hosts because, they might get to shake the host's hand for a second. But really, I think people are thrilled to have the chance to meet one another and be a part of something bigger than themselves too.
Yeah, we are fortunate that we have hosts and shows that really put a premium on that. You know what I'm saying? We took in a new podcast. It's not a new podcast. We took it in on Dirty Mo's platform this year called The Teardown. And the hosts are, they're NASCAR Media Corps members that are at the races, but they've been doing this for years. His name's Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi. They will host meet and greets at the track with the people that consume their work. Been doing it for years. They'll get staggering numbers at these things. These are just, they're media people. They're covering the sport, but they've also emerged. I mean, and with their podcast, certainly, people want to know them and meet them, and they do it right. They do it well. I really do appreciate what they do, but that's more of what you're saying, that relational part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, I always like to kind of wind down with a future-looking question, and I would be remiss not to sort of get your take on what predictions you have for the future of podcasting and, or for Dirty Mo more specifically.
Well, now that's a big question. So my prediction for the future of podcasting, well, first of all, I'll go back to this. As long as people have ears, then there's going to be a place for this medium, and I believe that. I think that the industry will face challenges just like every other industry does. The more popular it becomes, the more people there, like market trends will probably fluctuate. The thing about podcasts is that they've been around for 2 decades now. And what podcasts always seem to do is they'll do this climb and then they'll kind of level off, but then they'll hit a wave again and then they level off and then they hit a wave. And at Dirty Mo, we play the long game. Because again, what we're trying to achieve, it's not based on financials. It's based on, feeding an audience that Dale already had, and growing that audience, but feeding them what they need, what they want. So as long as that's our goal, then we're here to ride the trends, right? Like we're pot committed. So the future podcast, I still think there's a big future. I don't think we're even close to realizing the potential, but I also think that a lot of people will probably get spooked as you go through different market trends the way they are, because they're in it either for the wrong reasons, they're in it because they thought that they were supposed to be, or it just was kind of the new catchy toy that they noticed, and that's fine. By the way, that's fine. I just think that that there's so much upside and so much potential that, like I said earlier, I think podcasters will become the new media stars, right? Mm-hmm. I think I would worry for the mainstream media that you've known for the past, 10, 20, 30 years. I would worry if I'm them, because honestly, people are consuming and platforming these types of hosts and these types of voices as the ones that they're really gravitating towards. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that there's a lot of potential there still.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm personally going to be riding that wave with you. I'm here in podcasting for the long haul. So, whatever happens, we'll be in it together.
Well, you and I have already come up with a show idea that we're going to do, and we're not going to tell anybody what it is yet, right? Because we're going to, we're going to plan it out, right?
Yeah,
we're going to launch it, and it's going to be received in a massive way, right? This idea that we have.
Yeah, so that's up next. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate all your insights so much. And we're so grateful for your partnership at Dirty Mo. And thank you for being here.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.